vacations. We press on, especially when we're talking about the market in such a confounding, interesting time when everyone wants to talk about their opinion and tell you all they know about the market and why they're making their decisions based on this crazy market that may not be an accurate description of this market. So is this a good time to buy? Should you be selling now? Should you be buying now? What is the right choice for you? Well, guys, I'm excited to actually introduce today's guest. He is a whiz when it comes to loans. He's a whiz when it comes to the market. He's awesome. You're going to love what he has to bring. I know it. We are going to encourage you to bring your questions, just like we always do. Bring your questions to the chat, whatever you're watching in, whether it's YouTube, whether it's Facebook, whether it's my business page, my personal page, or Twitter, which I'm known for my YouTube account and not so much my Twitter account. But if you're on Twitter, welcome as well. So we welcome wherever you're coming from, and we want to hear all your questions. Again, to introduce myself, most of you know me because you're coming back. My name is Brian, a realtor here in the Boise Valley, and I say here as in Boise because I'm actually not there right now. But Boise Valley, been doing this for 5 or 6 years. Was an appraiser before that for a couple of years, and was an appraiser long before I was an appraiser in the 2008, 9, 10 range when the economy was doing some other things. So we have just a lot to talk about with the market. So we have a lot to unpack, whether it's the Fed, whether it's supply and demand, whether it's inflation, whether it's the job market, whatever it might be. We're going to talk about everything so that you can make an informed decision. There's a lot of people making huge decisions based on what they know. And so I don't claim to know it all, but I claim to know people who know a whole lot more than me. And that's why we've got Eric today coming on to join us later on. But first, we're going to dive in. While those comments all come in, please put those questions in the chat. While those comments all come in, we're going to talk about just kind of the state of the market compared to this month to last month, what things feel like compared to what do the numbers say. So we're going to start with just a broad overview in Ada County. Ada County, for those joining us, Ada County is the eastern side of the Treasure Valley. So Boise, Meridian, Star, Garden City, Eagle, Cuna, and did I cover them all? I think that's it. And that's the eastern side of the valley, Treasure Valley. So what has happened in Ada County in the month of October? That's taken the mid-September to mid-October compared to mid-September. If we were to take this into statistics class, you'd be looking at pretty much the same. We have roughly 1,400 homes for sale in that period in September compared to roughly 1,400. And Gene, I'm not sure if you can get those graphics up for roughly 1,400 in the current Ada County market. Do we have, if we go to pendings, we have 610 compared to 530. So that's a little bit down, but we have about the same amount of actives. When we look at solds in such a large number, 660 to 698, so when you compare those two sides, very similar when because we're looking with large numbers, right? This is way less than one standard deviation. If you'll pull up the TI-83 calculator and figure that out. Median days on market has gone up. I don't think it's a shock to anyone in the Ada County. Median sold price down a tick. I don't think that shocks anyone. Lowest prices is just more fun than anything. It just kind of shows the bare level, the bare minimum. 290 roughly to 235, and the highest priced home, again, kind of a fun stat more than anything else, 2.3 compared to 2.3. So that's Ada County as a whole. Guys, if you're joining us, I can see you guys coming on. If you have questions about the market, today's live topic is the market. So if you have those questions, put those in the chat, type those in. We have a market expert. And no, that is not me. I am an expert. I'm an expert with a small e. Eric is the expert with a capital E, and he'll probably tell us that that's wrong, but he really does know a lot. He studies this stuff a lot more than I do. And let's see. In fact, a lot of the market knowledge that I have comes from the people I associate with, right? So the economists, the lenders, everything else. So we're going to dive into Eagle's numbers to look at those as well. When we look at Eagle's numbers, active listings was 154 compared to this month. At this snapshot is 127. Pending, roughly the same number, 66 to 65. Solds were up a tick, 65 to 79. Average days on market, again, no shock. We're going to see this trend continue through a lot of the cities. Days on market is up. and median sold on Eagle is down. Again, when you have 79 solds, you can have that's a lot better than 65 solds there in that past month. But the median price went above a million, and now it's at 885. And usually we see that if you guys have been following these lives, usually Eagle is between 860 and 950, and even in good markets, it's hovered in between there and gone up and down. Lowest price again, just for fun, 350 to 380, and highest price 2.2 and change to 2.2 and change. So I like that price per square foot on there as well. When we look at those numbers, kind of fun to compare those. Meridian, let's look at Meridian's numbers. Meridian active homes, we had 485 compared to 460. For the pendings, we're looking at 173 to 164. That in this is very, very, very close. Solds 180, 196, very, very close, but a tick up, similar to Eagle. Median days on market, a tick up. Median sold price, a tick down. If you were to take these all side by side, you'd see the same trend, right? Every time. Lowest sold price, 290, 267, and then the highest price, roughly both $500 a square foot, 1.6 to 1.9. All right. Let's see here. And then we're going to let's dive into Star. And after Star, we're going to stop and we're going to go into the market. We're going to go to the market because that is what we're all waiting here for. So September, we had active listings 74 up to 94. That's quite a difference. Week by week, as I monitored this come through, there was 1 week where only a few homes were listed. It was crazy. It was just a random coincidence, and every other city kept pretty strong. But Star was pretty low. Pendings, very, very much the same. Solds, we went up quite a bit when you take a percentage, 37 to 46. That's quite a bit. Median days on market doubled, went up about 7 days. Other markets went up less percentages, but similar amount of days. Median sold price 655 to 636. That's a tick down, and then lowest price very, very similar, and highest price went up 600 grand. So there you guys are. There you can see that graphic coming in. So without further ado, I want to bring our guest in. We are just covered those few cities for now in Ada County. There are more to talk about. We could talk about Boise, Middleton, Caldwell, Nampa, Cuna, and we just might cover those, especially with your comments that come in and as you request those. But I really want to get onto the market. So the market is doing a number right now. What is the market doing? How should we act? How should we behave? I want to welcome on one of my preferred lenders, Eric Leigh, with you can see with guaranteed rate, and you can see where I'm from. I'm from whatever these words say back here, from the children's primary room that I'm in. So Eric, welcome.
Hey, thanks, Brian. Appreciate the chance to be on here with you and your viewers.
Look at that. Right when you hop on, the viewers go up. So you're doing something right already. I appreciate that. Okay, Eric, I want to chat. So Eric knows, and I know how many conversations we have about the market. The market, I have learned a ton in the last year. The market is something I feel like a lot of us pretend to know something about. But then when you really dive into it, there's so much going on. There's inflation, there's secondary market, there's the Fed. What other excuses have you heard, Eric?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about the market, and I hear the questions all around rates, right? So rates are going up. It's no surprise. Like, that's been the biggest trend that has caught people by surprise. Not the fact that rates have gone up, but how fast and how violently rates have moved up. It really makes it difficult for pre-approved home buyers to go out and actually shop for a home in this market. Brian, you work for buyers, you know what it's like. I mean, we could pre-approve a buyer at, I'll just pick a rate for example, 6% last week, and we could see a rate that's 0.75% higher a week later. Extreme rate movement and volatility like we haven't seen in long times of market width. So it's been just crazy.
Yeah. And when we talk about the rates, Gene just showed those markets. Show those rates, Gene, and Eric, tell us where you've seen in the last 2 weeks. What range have we seen in the rates? Do you have that off the top of your head?
Oh gosh, yeah. I would say I do. I've got a chart I'm going to look at just to make sure I get this right. Oh, cool. I mean, we've seen rates in the last month, I would say, move up about 1/4 to 0.3%. It has moved really, really fast. We've seen steeper periods of faster movements than that, but the problem is just how fast they move. Anybody can stomach a week where rates move up 1/8% or down 1/8%. we're seeing those sometimes day after day after day, and you get into a 1 week period, sometimes 3/8 to 0.5%. That's way too much movement for normal. So that's the problem that we're facing right now, Brian. It's just how fast things are going.
Yeah. So when you have a buyer who's pre-approved, like you talked about, is it possible that they're pre-approved and then because the market moves so violently that you get the message when you get into your next meeting and it changed, not be a fault of yours, but just because that was the first you saw them, that note was 30 minutes later and you wanted to lock, they wanted to lock. I mean, how does that work?
Yeah. Yeah. In short, it doesn't work very well, right? Because if we're going to pre-approve somebody and they're getting ready to go on the home search, I mean, unless they're going to find a home in 24 hours, the rate can potentially change the very next day, sometimes multiple times in the day if the market's really moving. So as lenders, when we're pre-approving our buyers to get out and search for homes with realtors like you, we have to almost raise that qualified rate by 0.5%, sometimes 0.75%, just to make sure that we protect them in case the market moves against us. A pre-approved borrower is only as good as the market rates move to in a period while they're searching for a home and before they lock that rate. So that's the biggest challenge. Pre-approving buyers in defense of the market moving against them, like it's been doing almost all of this year.
Yeah, I've seen that and experienced that for sure. Bob, thanks for joining us. Bob and others, let us know. We'd love to know where you're coming from. Tell us where your city is. And then if you're watching this live, tell us that you're watching it live. If you're on a replay, that was awesome because when you put in those questions, we still see them and I still respond to them. So, but if you're on live, you have the lucky chance that we'll be able to answer your questions and I will defer to Eric and my market knowledge is really more firsthand knowledge. I get a lot of people saying, hey, how are the rates? You know, how are the, what's the market like? What's the temperature of the market? And it really depends in, for me, the temperature, like how many leads am I getting in from my lead sources? How many people are putting in buyers? Are they cash buyers? Are they finance? Like to me, it's really temperature. And so a lot of times I can answer that question with temperature, but Eric can take these questions and he operates in temperature as well. But I really want to speak, Eric, if you can, about, I want you to speak to it, not me, because heaven knows I'm not where you're at in that knowledge. Is what do you think the number one factor? Let's go like that. Let's change that question. What's the number one misconceived idea about mortgage lending rates?
Yeah, well, right now, and I would say lots of years, but I think the Federal Reserve just raised mortgage rates. I mean, I get that question all the time. It's been so front and center, right? I mean, the press and the news and the mass media have jumped on this. Every time the Federal Reserve has met the last 5 or 6 meetings, they have raised interest rates, but they haven't raised it on mortgage rates. And I really want all your viewers to understand this. When the Federal Reserve meets, and they're going to meet again in November, and they come out of that 2-day meeting for policy and they say, we are raising rates 0.75% or 0.75% or 75 basis points, however you want to say it. That does not mean that they just raised mortgage rates 0.75%. But that's what most people think. I can't even tell you how many phone calls that mortgage lenders like me start to get on the days leading up to that. Eric, we got to get in and lock that rate before the Fed finishes their meeting. Rates are going to go up. What's really interesting about that is a couple of the meetings this year where the Fed raised rates, the very next day, our mortgage rates actually went down. So it's not what people think that it is. So back to your question, what's the number one misconception? The Federal Reserve raises mortgage rates. And I'd like to deep dive into that a little bit if there's time, but I'll let you take that lead if we want to, because it's not the Federal Reserve.
No, totally. So what I learned from that topic that I want to ask you a question on, because you could have a chance, just like you explained to me earlier a few weeks ago. Well, I think you sent me an article to read to get educated, was why does the mortgage lending rate go down if the Fed raises the rate up? The Fed rate is the rate they lend at. So how come that doesn't make a domino effect on the mortgage housing market?
Yeah. That's the question, is what causes mortgage rates to move? So let's start off by answering that with what does not cause rates to move. It's not the Federal Reserve. Believe it or not, it's not banks and credit unions, okay? It's certainly not Congress. Really all it is investor demand or lack of demand for mortgage-backed securities as an investment. Just like if you or I were interested in, I'll just make up an example, no allegiance to this company, Apple. If I thought that Apple was a good investment and I was buying shares of Apple, and if there were lots of other investors buying shares of Apple, then the price of that stock would be going up if there were more buyers than sellers, okay? That's just simple supply demand. It's the same thing for mortgage rates. Mortgage rates are driven by mortgage-backed securities and the demand or lack of demand for those as an investment. So if there are more investors that are wanting to buy mortgage-backed securities and ratcheting up the demand for that, there's an inverse relationship between that and the rates that we get. So if the demand for those is going up, the yield or the interest rates that are on mortgages are going down. So right now, and we're in a period where there has not been as good demand for mortgage-backed securities from the investor community. That's why rates have been going up. But that's just understanding the dynamic that causes them to move. Why would an investor choose to purchase a mortgage-backed security or not? It really has to do with inflation. So I'd like to share some charts if we can to help illustrate this, because this is a very visual thing and very hard to follow unless you can see. So let's go back to the other chart first before we go to this one, if you don't mind, Gene. Perfect, thank you so much. So what you're looking at right here is about a 4-year window. It's actually going back to January of 2017. That's the average 30-year fixed mortgage rate from January of 17 up until now. Now you can see the rates were kind of plodding along there side to side through 17, 18, and 19. They were in that 5 to 4% range, and then they started trending down and down and down until they got into that 3% line. You can see that line 3 on the y-axis going across. They were there until basically January of this year. And then they spiked up higher, fast, right? That's that extreme run up on rates that we were just talking about, okay? Why would rates spike up? And let's go ahead and pull off the graphic for a minute and just come back to Brian and I. You have to understand what inflation is, because inflation, if you just want to just call it what it is, it's the period of rising costs in an economy. Gene, if you could take the graphics down and just pull us back up for a minute. So anytime that you have rising costs for everything, right? So Brian, you have a family, you go gas up the vehicle, you go to the grocery store and buy eggs, whatever, right? Everything now is way more expensive than it was 2 years ago, even a year ago, okay? That rising cost of everything, no matter what it is you're talking about, that makes the value of our dollars significantly less, because a dollar would buy this many eggs last year, and now it only buys this many eggs, right? That's what inflation is. So a mortgage is an investment. If you want to think about it as an investment, there is a fixed rate of return on that, assuming that it's a 30-year fixed mortgage. Let's do some real simple number examples. Let's say that I'm a mortgage investor and I want to buy a mortgage-backed security that's going to yield 5%, and it's on a $100,000 loan, okay? So I purchased this mortgage-backed security earning 5% on a $100,000 loan. Well, 5% on $100,000, that's easy math. That's $5,000 per year, okay? So for as long as I own that mortgage-backed security, I'm going to earn as an investor $5,000 per year. That feels great, right? $5,000 every single year without fail. Now again, take that same $5,000 and put it into a period of inflation where food is rising, gas prices are rising, the cost to go on vacation rising. If you think about everything getting more expensive, that $5,000 now doesn't quite work as well for us, right? So as an investor, and I'm feeling the pinch of inflation just like everyday Main Street consumers are, I may not be very interested in a mortgage that's paying me 5%, because inflation has eroded the future value of that as an investment for me, because everything costs so much more money. So where will I buy that then? If it's not 5%, is it 5.5%? Is it 6%? Is it 6.5%, 7%, 7.5%? You get the picture there. Eventually there's a delta, if you want to call it that, where when that mortgage-backed security rate gets to a certain level, I will now feel tempted to jump back in and purchase that, because now the interest makes sense to me given the period of inflation that we're in. So now think about that with the charts. And Gene, if you'll go ahead and go back to that interest rate chart that we were just looking at, and I want everybody that's viewing here to take a look at that track record of the mortgages. So take a look at the right.
And if I can jump in real quick,
Yeah.
Bob asked the question: Are interest rates up year over year? And I think this graph shows that nicely to answer that
100%,
question.
Bob.
So
Yes, not that they're up
keep going
100%,
with
but you
that.
see, it's pretty clear. So I want everybody to take a look at where rates were in January of 2002, right down there on the 3% line, and now they're up almost close to 7%. Okay. Now we just established that inflation is what drives demand down because inflation eats away at the future value of these. Gene, if you can flip to the next chart, this is the inflation chart. So the title there is Sticky Price Consumer Price Index. What that shows is if you go back to July of 2021, so about 6 months before our rates started going up, all of the inflation started to really come in, okay? So inflation started ticking up in July of 2001, and eventually that trickled through to not good rates. Rates have to move higher to account for that higher inflation. So that inflation curve right there that you're seeing on the screen, as inflation gets worse and worse and worse, that eventually trickles through into fixed rate investments like mortgages that we just described. Because as an investor, I need to demand a higher rate of return for my investment to compensate for the high rate of inflation, the cost of everything. So let's open up to more questions if there are any, because that's really the dynamic that I really want people to understand. Inflation is what drives interest rates.
Awesome. I like it. I think that's very well explained. And then let's wait for questions to come in if they have them on that. And while we do that, Tyler Grange has a question for us that we can attack. So, and maybe this is already answered, but I don't think so. So I'm going to read the question, and Eric, if you take it. With the rates going up and less loans, I'm assuming he says there are less loans going through, are lenders still keeping all the same requirements as far as DTI, income required, et cetera, as before? Or are they loosening up the requirements to people does it show the whole thing? Let me see if I can see the whole thing
to
over
allow
here.
some people to qualify is I think what he was trying to say there. So
Yep.
I'll just give you a short answer, Tyler. It's a really good question. The short answer is everything is about the same. In fact, I would say that now compared to the pandemic, everything is a little bit easier now to qualify for, because it kind of makes sense, right? If you go back to 2020 when COVID hit us and governments had to start shutting down businesses, et cetera, the economy's on lockdown, we as mortgage lenders had a real unique challenge on there. We've got somebody who is gainfully employed until the middle of March, whenever that happened, and all of a sudden they were sent home without the ability to work. And certainly maybe they got some unemployment or some of that pandemic assistance that came through Congress, but still we had to shut down at that point. Now, as the pandemic, most parts of the country has largely not been a factor for these kind of things. Mortgage underwriting is basically the same as it was before then. Not any looser, really not any tighter, just about the same. And that's kind of the easiest answer to give you on that, Tyler.
Cool. I appreciate that. Bob, good seeing you on here as well. Hopefully Marianne's watching as well. So what's amazing to me is that we have so many people we have like 3 different groups from the Philippines, which is hilarious. I'm not sure why people move away from Idaho, then come and want to come back. They go to the Philippines. I guess we gain so many Californians and Washingtonians that our excess goes to the Philippines and then comes back to Idaho. I think that's the message I'm getting out of all this.
Maybe, yeah.
Great answer. Great answers, Eric. Thank you for that. I am certainly glad you can take these on, because I read an article or two or listen to someone, I'm like, oh, I get the economy, I get interest rates, and then I couldn't take these questions on. So one thing that I found was interesting in one of the articles that you sent me was how, and I'd love if you can speak to this, is how the mortgage rates are forward looking. And so they're trying to stay a step. So as I understood it, I'll just speak to what I know, and then I'd like you to speak further, I guess, is what I understood from the article is, so the mortgage world is saying, okay, we think that the rates are going to be X from the Fed. The Fed has already said they can raise the rates in November, right? That's common knowledge. And so mortgage rates try to get ahead of that. And so we can see an inverse relation. We don't have a relationship between the two, because one's trying to predict what the other's doing, and the other one's doing things based on inflation. And so why are they not, I guess I have a 2-part question here. Why are they not including, I've heard them talk a ton about employment rate. Why are you not talking about employment rate and all this then?
Yeah. And let's back up just a little bit and talk about when you say mortgages getting ahead of it. I think the better way to say that is probably investors, the investor community. They're trying to get ahead of that and price that in before it happens. So it's been pretty well telegraphed right now that the Fed is going to raise rates by 0.75% in November. Quiz. Does that mean that they are raising mortgage rates in November? No, that does not mean that. But if you think about what the Fed's actions are doing, when they raise the federal funds rate, which that will trickle through to rates that you pay on credit cards that you revolve balances, interest rates on home equity lines of credit if you have balances, car loan rates, things like that, those rates are going to get higher, and that creates higher costs for financing all of those different things. That's another way to put that is demand destruction. Because as things get more expensive, just like the inflation we talked about in the economy with regular food, gas in the tank, things like that, that means people have less money to spend. When there's less money to spend, that causes inflation to come down. That might mean that our economy goes into a recession. And believe it or not, that is normal. It is expected. Economies always cycle. It just takes time. So as the Fed gets in front of that, and they're trying to raise rates to slow down inflation, investors are also looking to what the Fed is telegraphing they're going to do. So if the Fed says they're going to raise rates 0.75%, and that's viewed favorably by the markets as trying to tamp down inflation, but then they surprise us and they come out and say, well, actually, we're kind of concerned about stuff. We're going to cut rates 0.5%. I'm not saying that that's going to happen because there is 0% chance it would, at least in the November meeting. But if that happened, you would see mortgage rates really start to move higher because that would be taken as a sign that, boy, now we've got a real problem on here and they're trying to stimulate, but then there would be a correction almost immediately because now we're probably going into a recession. You would see some massive whipsawing if that was to happen. The unemployment rate, we'll come to that now. When you need to slow down an economy and get in front of inflation, there just simply has to be less money being spent. That's the key, okay? One way for less money to be spent is to have less money in circulation. One way to get less money in circulation is for people to be laid off, right? Perfect example, you're making $120,000 a year working wherever, and you're laid off. And then you go down to the unemployment office and you file for unemployment. You're not going to get $120,000 per year at the unemployment office, right? So you immediately, your household is going to spend much less simply because the income isn't coming in. Now, it may take a little bit of time if you got some savings built up and whatnot, but a responsible household, if they had that drastic of an income cut, that spending would slow down dramatically. And that's why the unemployment rate, when it goes up, meaning job losses are happening in an economy, that is the last shoe to drop when an economy moves into recession.
Good. Like always, great answer. Great answer. I'm going to put up a question from Bob. Bob is over in the Philippines as well. He says, Bob says, Brian and Eric, you guys are good at future telling. And I say, Bob, you're good at jokes. Yeah. How long will these mortgage rates stay at historic highs?
Yeah. To clarify, he said, are you guys good at future telling? So I will say absolutely not. My crystal ball broke a long time ago, Bob. So sorry about that.
Right.
I will the answer that some of the industry experts that I learn and get coached from and follow are saying. So I'll just call out the name Barry Habib, who is one of the mortgage market and mortgage-backed securities. I mean, he is one of the go-to experts in the country. He thinks the mortgage rates will start moving off these all-time lows towards the end of fourth quarter or the start of first quarter 2023. Why? Because that's when we think that there will be enough decreasing of the inflation rate. It's going to take some time and Fed rate hikes to do that and to show. But by that time, we should start seeing inflation coming down. And like we were talking earlier in the stream here, once inflation starts to move down, then we should start to see yields and rates on mortgages start to move down as well, because there is a very good correlation there. Based on those two graphs we showed you, it's pretty clear what happens there.
Cool. And to piggyback that on, since a lot of you guys are buyers, when as a agent, the number of homes I show historically, I'm speaking as an agent as a whole. The stats from Showing Time is a company that tracks some of this data, and they have data to it because they schedule listings. There is a increase in buyer activity come after the new year, and so if you have mortgage rates going supposedly going down in January, and you have supposedly more buyers in January, some of us are hopeful, and this is my way of saying a crystal ball without having to say it, because heaven knows my crystal ball definitely does not work. But that's my way of saying it. Is January a good time to buy? Is January a good time to list? To me, I am hopeful that January brings more buying activity, more selling activity. However, and this is not just me, that we had a chat in our Facebook group with our brokerage this week. And it was about the buying activity and what we're seeing in the market. The market feels warm this week to me. I'm not sure how many pre-approvals have come over your desk, comparatively speaking, to last, Eric, or how many deals you've gotten under contract. I thought I'd come on a 48-hour vacation and enjoy the time. I have been working nonstop today, and that's not always the case. Even in it's just interesting how, and one of my colleagues who actually introduced me to Eric, she is telling me that she had like her busiest, I think she put like 5 under contract in the last like 9 days, like 2 listings and 3 buyers or something. And so, and that's just 2 people. It's just 2 people, but the whole brokerage, there's 240 or 60 of us. That was kind of the common consensus, is the activity right now is actually feels good. I don't know what the numbers, if I could take all the numbers and just throw them out the door and just say, how does it feel? To me, that's how it feels. It looks like I'm having some connection issues. Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you, and I'll just echo that from the mortgage side.
Oh.
I feel a lot better now than I felt in the second quarter and even the third quarter. I'm just got a lot more buyer activity, buyers that are active in the pipeline and closing this fourth quarter. I'm feeling much better about things than I was even back in the second quarter, Brian. So I agree with that.
Wow. It looks like I had some connection issues. I hope you just took over for me. I'm not sure when I went blank there, but I had some really good jokes you guys missed, apparently.
I'll make one comment to what Bob said there, if you don't mind, real quick. I love the comment too. By the way, Eric, we're in a recession already. We're now at over 4 months of slow economic growth. It's kind of interesting. A lot of people take that old definition, right? But there is a referee that makes the calls if we're in a recession. I had to Google it because I couldn't remember what the organization was called, but it's the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD. So they are the referees that say, yes, we're in a recession, or no, we're not. But to his point, and I agree, it seems like maybe the goalposts for defining a recession have been moved just a little bit in this period. For whatever reasons, I'm not going to hypothesize on what they are. So.
Nice. All right, guys. Any other questions come in? Tell us where you're chatting from, what questions you have. Eric, is there anything else? Let's see. Here we go. We got Eric. We got Bob. Let's see. You say, I'm Larry because during the Obama administration we had a recession all the years. I won't pretend to speak to that. Eric, do you have anything to say to that?
Like I said, I'm not going to hypothesize on whether or not the goalposts have been moved. I feel like there is a real economic slowdown. I think everybody is feeling that. There are more layoffs being announced. We're in an inverted yield curve. All of these things that define recessions are happening, but it does take a certain amount of time to happen and then look backwards to be able to get the data to show that we're in a recession. If you made me and stuck me on the stage and said, yes, call it, or no, we're not, yes, we are, no, we're not, I would say, yes, we are.
Yeah. Well put. Okay, so when I have buyers like you guys come to town, we have shop time, it's go time, and I want Eric to I want you to have a little plug for yourself. Like they do on podcasts, they'll say, where can they find you? Well, I want you to tell us where we can find you. And I also want you to tell us why you, and why Guaranteed Rate, because I think you work with Guaranteed Rate for a reason. And so I want you to kind of talk about where they can find you and Guaranteed Rate.
Sure. I appreciate that, Brian. So anytime that you have questions about anything mortgage, home purchase related, you can always reach out to me, give me a call, send me an email. You can find me on social media. Gene, thanks for putting that up there. That's my email address to the company, and then my cell phone. That's the number right to me. I work at Guaranteed Rate simply because I am able to control my interest rates here in a way that I can't at any other place I've ever worked. Brian, you and I have spoke to this a little bit too. I have the ability to set my interest rates, and I've purposely set them low because this rate volatility, all the things that we were talking about earlier in the stream, that makes it really difficult for people to get into homes. So if I can intentionally and proactively lower my rates during this time where not only do I need it, but home buyers who are trying to qualify in these times need it, I think it gives me a better advantage over some of my competitors, okay? I love Guaranteed Rate because the mortgage pre-approval process and the loan process are just easier here because of our technology platform. If you're somebody who can sit down on a smartphone or on a computer and navigate just normally, everything that you need to do mortgages with me can be done right on those platforms, whether it be mobile on your smartphone or on your laptop. It's very easy to get that done. From the start where we apply to when we sign final documents fully remote, if that's what you need. We had a buyer recently just relocate from Idaho to Michigan. I think you might remember them, Brian, because they were your clients you referred. They were in an Airbnb in Montana, and they did their online closing with a remote notary back in Virginia. They loved the process because they didn't have to go meet a notary in the middle of somewhere in a coffee shop and sign 100 pages and try to remember all that. It was all done online from the Airbnb that they were staying at in Montana. So the technology platform, not only for me as the originator and the person helping the customer, but for our customers, it just makes the job and the process a lot smoother and a lot easier. So I guess in short, that's why I love Guaranteed Rate, and that's why I choose to work here.
That's awesome. I want to speak. So I was actually in the closing of my customers, Eric's customers, as they were closing on their house they're selling in Meridian Eagle area, and they told the person signing them for the sale of their house that they were not going to a title or a notary for their closing, and she said that you can't do that. And Matt and Karen, they're like, well, I'm pretty sure that's what he said. And I'm like, and I already saw the docs come through my email.
Oh, we lost you there for a minute, Brian, but I'll pick up the story, what he was saying. So these clients that he was talking about, they were selling their house in Idaho, and then they were closing on a new house back in Michigan. So at the closing in Idaho, when they went to sell that house, and they were telling the escrow officer about how they were going to do their next closing online, the escrow officer in Idaho told them, well, no, you can't do it that way. You have to go and meet somebody on a remote notary, and they'll bring the papers. And they're like, well, that's not what we think is going to happen. And again,
it's not
earlier. Yeah, they were at an Airbnb on a Wi-Fi connection on their laptop doing a remote closing with a notary that we hire, mobile remote notary, back in Virginia. It was great.
That's awesome. Yeah, and then one more thing I have a lot of choice with lenders. Eric knows the business. Eric, not only does he try to gain more real estate agents, but I, as a real estate agent, answer and turn away a lot of phone calls from lenders. I am very picky who I work with. I am very picky who I choose to partner with. Eric, and I know he has saved 2 deals of mine because he has taken, and they've not been the lender that have not put him as the lender on that deal originally. He has, out of his own kindness, out of his own love for education, which you can tell is a brilliant whiz at it. He's really good at educating. He has saved 2 of my deals because he was willing to take the time with my customers that weren't his customers on those transactions. He does the right thing. He is smart. He educates. He does not gouge you. His rates, his origination fees are the lowest, or if not the lowest, they're within a few bucks the lowest. And by a few, I mean 10 or 20 bucks. I mean, we're talking negligible difference. And he's a good guy to work with, and he's honest, and he gets the job done. And because of that, I mean, I love having Eric in my corner. So this is, and you guys might not know this. I don't know if you guys know this. Real estate industry is way regulated. We can't get kickbacks. So I don't push Eric because Eric puts money in my pocket. I push Eric because Eric helps my customers. So I appreciate everything that's come. Let's see if there's any more of these chat before I go. Let Eric on. Let's have Eric on more often. I'm sure, because Eric loves to educate. I know I don't have to. Eric would love to. Let's see. And then can we put Eric's information in the box below? Let's see here.
Oh, there it's on the screen. That's nice.
And I put it in the box. So there you guys have it. Thanks for joining us. If you guys have any other questions, you guys can feel free to reach me, 208-213-2092. Eric is 208-880-0316. Eric, we have the same open door policy. If you have any questions, it's 24/7. Give us a call. If we're in a meeting, whatever else, please, we'll get back to you. We all have other things, but we want to make you feel like number one. So we will, as soon as we can, we'll make those happen for you. Call or text anytime. Questions about the market, question about Boise, question about housing, question about anything, we're here for you. And we thank you guys for joining us, and we'll catch you guys next time.